Yeah, I'm just going to get started. Hopefully I can share this out and everyone can see these slides.
All good.
Cool. All right. So we're going to go just a little quick. I'll paste this up and say, good morning, everybody. This is the Supercharge Business Apps of Microsoft Foundry and Copilot from innovation to implementation. Joking with Heidi in the background, there was some tremendous fun and work over the past few days to get a bunch of this branding and stuff updated. So I'll kind of go through that in a second, but as Microsoft paces himself through things like Ignite and whatever else, so too do these tools brand and change and ebb and flow. So quick slide about me. My name is Chris Gill. I say modern workplace advocate, cloud. I cover a lot. I joke about the T-shaped architect, pretty wide, deep in some areas and not as deep in others, but been an MVP for 5 years now, renewed MCT recently, cover a lot of Azure, a lot of M365, and I just normally can't turn my brain off with ADHD, so that's why I tend to learn a lot at nighttime. So, all right. Here's a quick agenda. Just want to address like who this is really for. Again, we said about, potentially customizing some of this for what we talked about right before we kicked this meeting off or the session off. Some of you, and I won't point fingers, but some of you had mentioned AI, Azure AI Foundry, AI Studio. It's officially Microsoft Foundry now. So as of a month or so ago, Microsoft had rebranded that. We'll talk and dive deeper into that and what that all means. There's an overview of Copilot Studio with extensibility, some callouts to what's new, just some brief understanding about grounding, RAGs, RAG approaches, connectors, actions, and some governance. So I know some folks said Purview. I don't know that I cover a lot of Purview in here, but in the Microsoft world, if there's something that's related to reporting, security, or whatnot, that's still going to be in a Purview space anyway, so along with Sentinel.
Can you remind me what RAG stands for?
So resource augmented general, I always forget the G. But basically, I'll cut it this way. So what you can do is basically think of business data, and enriching big data with what you have as business data. So instead of churning through and just saying, here's the general pool of what's, maybe out on the internet, you're enriching that with what you have as business data in your environment. So good question. Our overall message, again, it's a deeper into engineering co-pilots, but really just kind of showing you all and taking you on this path of what Microsoft Foundry and Copilot Studio can bring to you, meeting you at where you are with your Power Platform progress. My key requirement, again, Nick, you nailed it. Thank you. I want this to be conversational, so please interrupt me. I do go fast at times. If I need to slow down, just let me know. There is some demos in here, but please, come off mute, ask questions. I like it that way because it helps me customize this for you, and I want you to get the most that you can out of this. All right. The spectrum of Copilot agent capabilities. So when we talk about agents, agents are definitely not one size fits all. So they exist on a spectrum, and depending on how complex what they're designed to do. So on this left side, we have retrieval agents. Simplest type, think of something that maybe pulls in information. You can ground data, and answer questions. So I usually equate that to a Q&A bot for folks who've been, working with PVA and Power Virtual Agents, or other tools, prior to Copilot Studio. That's what I would consider a Q&A bot. Then we have these task agents. So think of these as something that takes action, maybe automates a workflow, but the intent is that it replaces a repetitive task. They are way more capable, but they're also more impactful for your business and your needs. Then on the far right, we have autonomous agents. So these autonomous agents, I consider them to be the most advanced. They can operate independently, they plan dynamically, they orchestrate other agents, and they escalate when needed. So if any of you have heard of human in the loop, so this is where the task, maybe the autonomous agent is doing something, you've trained it and you've customized it and built it such that it will handle this task, but it still needs to get an approval from a human, or it still needs to offset something to a human or escalate to a human. So think of it that way. So again, I look at this slide, I think of it as kind of a journey. So the retrieval, task, and anonymous, as we move from left to right across the spectrum, the power and the risk increases. What that also means is that when this risk increases across the spectrum, our controls also need to increase in scale as well. So that's where agent controls comes in. So not everyone out there is they're building agents or developers, right? So we have what we used to call, or maybe still call, citizen developers, citizen engineers. We have folks that are still building things, and that's totally okay. So, end user, citizen engineer, citizen developer, or developer. They can all fit into that space. Copilot Studio supports that full spectrum for makers. So on the left side for the end users, we have an agent builder. So any of you that have touched that, you can go and, maybe inside of D365, you have field service agent, or, just standard M365, you may have other um, agents that you can use for either SharePoint or whatever else. This is basically a guided way. So think of it as a wizard or a guided way to build and create agents without code. For the makers, the middle section, we have a low code experience, but a little more customization. Any of you that are familiar with Power Automate, looks very similar, right? So you have a thing that's potentially stepped into another thing or an action or what have you. So again, for the developer side of that, for makers, it does integrate with Microsoft Foundry and Visual Studio. So you can use Visual Studio Code, which is free. That gives you a deeper code and pro code extensibility. And that's, again, within the Copilot Studio mainstay. So what that really comes down to is you can take simple automation and grow into something that's even more complex and multi-system agent over time and as needs evolve within that one connected environment.
Yeah, I've got a question about the different variations in the tools that you referenced, like the Copilot Studio. Are there licensees just for the Copilot Studio, or is it just can you do the pay-as-you-go just for the usage of the agents? How does that work?
Yeah, so licensing, I knew that was going to come up. I need a slide for licensing, I swear, or a licensing agent. Maybe we'll build that. That would be a fun session. But yeah, from the perspective of licensing, as of MS Ignite, Microsoft Ignite, it was a rebrand. So at one point it was, okay, go stand up Copilot Studio. You have user licenses, and then you have a service license of, at that time, it's like $200 a month to run any amount of agents. And then you had to buy messages on top of that. Those are now considered Copilot credits. So there's a little bit of a, like, depending on, and this could be an entire session in itself. But I would say, depending on the path of where you're coming from, if you're already licensed with like M5 or M365E5, you're going to get some of these things already included. Or you could be coming from a different part of the licensing model where some or all are somewhat included, but you would still need to pay for those credits. So I say credits meaning a session. Right. So if I go out, I interact with the agent, I discuss, I have, I prompt, I get responses back, and then I'm done, and I'm happy that the conversation went well or it didn't. Doesn't matter. If I end it, that's one credit or one session that's used. So hopefully that helps.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Um, let's see. So yeah, so back to on the far side again, and I failed. I do have Azure AI Foundry, so if anybody wants to keep track, let me know. Like somebody could write down how many times I screwed up and didn't put Microsoft Foundry, and that's okay. Um, but again, key features across this entire slate, whether no code or pro code, data protection, agent sharing, usage limits, and robust and cost management, like we were just discussing. So we can see, from a perspective of, how much are we spending, what kind of licensing, and to your point, Lawrence, if when we get to the part where it's not necessarily a Copilot agent, but it's built inside of Microsoft Foundry and it may get imported back into Copilot Studio to run, that's a different cost model as well, depending on what kind of features we're using inside of Microsoft Foundry. So, but yeah, key points here, just that the flexibility ensures that anyone in your organization can contribute to building and deploying intelligent agents. All right. So I keep saying let's pause and talk. I know this is a very busy screen. I look at on the left side developer tools that are available. So again, we talked a little bit about Copilot Studio and Visual Studio. GitHub, just one call out to GitHub as I see now inside of Copilot Studio and even over into Enter ID, where we can track and see agents that are stood up in our environment. There's a new button that's slowly coming to fruition on the right side that says GitHub. And we could actually store those solutions, those agents inside of GitHub. So nice little code revision process that I think many of us have wanted for quite some time now. So I will say this screen, at the end of the day, Microsoft Foundry, at least in my mind and my experience, is where all the magic happens. So this Foundry platform, including models, agent service, search, machine learning, observability. That flexible, secure platform really brings to fruition intelligent enterprise-ready agents. So, as we talk about using GitHub, Visual Studio, Copilot Studio, and then utilizing that Foundry SDK, we're giving from a pro code or even low code developer model access. So we're given access to go and utilize models, services, and agents through this one-stop shop developer experience. Inside of Foundry, and this is not a you know complete list, but as we talk about Foundry models, say Foundry models, think of LLMs or models that are available to you. Last I looked, maybe a week ago, I think we're around 11,000 models available through Microsoft Foundry. So as things come out in the world, the GPT-5, 5.1, any of the now Anthropic models like Claude, whatever else, Microsoft actually takes those, wraps their own hard candy security shell around those, and then republishes those through Foundry models. So it's sometimes a day or two, sometimes a week, sometimes they release them the same time that another partner company releases them. So very quick, very effective way. And again, within that one-stop shop, a very, native feel to integrating those with your agents. I would say this, once you are building out into, say pipelines, have them ready to deploy your agents, this is where you get a lot more flexibility as well. So depending on that use case, I think some folks mentioned beforehand, maybe you want to go serverless. You could go serverless and use Azure Functions, maybe container apps. You could still use Azure Apps for traditional web APIs. You could dive really deep into taking full control of something and utilize Azure Kubernetes services when needed. And at the end of the day, then you can wrap, again, on this far right side, you can take full control, deploy across the cloud, edge, or even local setups using Azure Arc and Azure Local. All right. Any questions here? Cool. All right. A little bit about data, right? At the end of the day, the agents are really only as good as the data that they're working with. So for us, it means that they're pulling from at least three main sources: productivity data inside of Microsoft 365 in the graph. So we were talking about Microsoft Graph, whether it's SharePoint, other Power Platform components, um, business data inside of Dataverse. So, and at the far right side, any kind of data that you may be storing inside of Fabric. So think of maybe I almost said one log, but big data, other components that you may be shuttling over from your M365 environment. So from that perspective, we have the ability across all of this data to bring in not only just Microsoft only connectors, but third-party connectors and systems to touch and utilize this data within the agent framework. The second you expand data access, the stakes go up though. So when we think about this, agents might be reasoning over this potentially highly sensitive business information. So governance, security controls cannot be an afterthought. And I think we all know that. A lot of this now Microsoft realizes, even after a year or so, that they have to bake these tools in for folks. It's getting too complex too quick. So if you have not heard, this may be the first introduction to what Microsoft has been calling the Copilot control system. So not just for, excuse me, not just for enabling agents, but securely enabling them. Every connector, data call, actions off to the agents are basically bound by security policies that control who can access what. So from an IT security perspective, this means you don't really have to choose between control and innovation. You can let people build and use agents, allowing access, sharing, and usage all managed in this one compliant framework. So in short, Microsoft Copilot makes data more usable, but just as importantly, it makes it governable. So let's talk a little bit deeper about some of the releases in Azure Foundry or Microsoft Foundry. Again, as of November timeframe, there were a ton of changes. So Microsoft had rebranded to Microsoft Foundry. Foundry IQ was something new that they had released, giving the agents access to enterprise data within SharePoint, OneLake, Azure Data Lake Storage, ADLS, and the web, all governed by Purview. So there's the thumbs up, the bell ring for Purview. Hosted agents, so teams can really develop these custom code agents in a fully managed runtime. Very low infrastructure setup. So, for folks who don't have an in-house Azure environment or Azure, team, this is a great way to at least get somewhat acquainted with Foundry, but you don't have to worry about all the heavy lift infrastructure to set it up. Multi-agent workflows and connected intelligence. Again, just calling out a massive catalog of partner tools. And I have a typo, it's not rules. Model Router GA and Anthropic, as I mentioned earlier. Anthropic was a huge announcement at Ignite. That partnership will continue to expand over time. Claude model is also available inside of Foundry. And now what excites me is this one-click publishing to Microsoft 365 and Teams. I will tell you, when I first started working with a bunch of this in 2019, it was incredibly difficult to get a Power Virtual Agent hooked up and authenticated and published into another, even Microsoft 365 or Teams environment. You have to go and set up an enterprise application. You have to make sure that authentication is all working. You'd have to use a bot token at that time to authenticate, and then you would need to take and export basically the configuration manually and dump it into Microsoft 365 or a team space. That's no longer the case. It gives you the ability now to just do that one-click approach and move on. Some things in preview. Foundry control plane. So much like I said, the Copilot control system, Foundry is also building a similar thing up. So they're giving you that ability to manage agents across your frameworks, across clouds, and across your environments. And then the agent framework, which we talked a little bit about, just an advancement on semantic kernel, but unified into a single SDK. All right. So I'm going to dive into a little bit of a demo, and we're going to hope that our demo gods and goddesses are treating us well. And let me just explain what I'm going to try and do here. So I really just want to show just the brief power of how that you could set up an Azure AI or Microsoft Foundry resource in classic mode. So if anybody's looking, seeing this new Foundry, I can select that. I'm still building familiarity with the new Foundry, so I'm very comfortable in classic. We're going to stay there for the session for right now. But I want to walk through and just show how this is set up, how it could be built inside of Foundry, introduce you all to the space, and then just kind of show some of the power of what I had built for a prior session this year. So when we talk about Foundry, you basically have a project, and a project is created with any number of resources. So on this left side, you'll see, content understanding, agents, knowledge, governments, all kind of other, or governance, I'll call it kind of other bits and pieces. What Foundry really allows you to do at the end of the day is take multiple Azure resources and utilize them within a AI project. So I could just build this has been built out as a Q&A bot with grounded or RAG approach to some data. So what does that mean? What I decided for this session was to say, let me take a real life scenario where maybe I'm at Disney World and I wanted to find the easiest way to either get to or find food that might be important to me. So somebody before the session started, we had a little, Christmas question about, what's most important. I think food was the biggest word. So that plays well into this. What I had done was I did some brief research, pulled together using Copilot, some artifacts, so 3-4 PDF files that basically had every detail I could possibly find about where food and different resources are located within the Disney parks, and then try and throw some nice things in, like how about ice cream or treats or whatever else. So let's walk through some of this. After I created the project, I'm going to call out two things on the screen. So the API key, very, very important. That is something that we would need later on. And when I say later on, this is where you have an integration point to Power Platform. So you would need this project endpoint from Foundry, and you would also need the API key. That allows you to securely connect to this resource, make calls, and basically do the work of the agent that it needs for what you built inside of Foundry. All right. A model, I'm going to go into model catalog just to show briefly. As we talked about different models available, I'm going to let this try and render for a minute or so. If it doesn't, I will tell you that it's trying to pull all 11,000 back in the screen. It's kind of crazy. It does filter them down to the most frequently used, but you'll see 142 right off the top. For this demo, I had chosen 4.1. So if I go into my agent, at one point I had done new agent and basically just gave it a name, gave it this model version, GPT 4.1 in here. So, and then utilize the deployment of GPT 4.1. And as we talked about knowledge, so here there are 3 files that I had taken. So basically just just quickly inside of this UI, very low code, said add, went and grabbed files that I already had stored inside of a storage blob. But again, you can use any one of these. So SharePoint, Azure AI Search, maybe it's in Fabric. Added those 3 files, let the search. Yeah, go ahead.
I said this looks like very similar to the Copilot Studio, where you start off with they give it a name, and then you give it your knowledge, and then you can add tools to it. The different
Bingo.
you're using the Copilot Studio, or in order to, Visual Studio Code to develop this instead of the fancy GUI that's in the Copilot Studio.
Yes. Yep. So yeah, and again, to your point, Lawrence, it's I could do it in Visual Studio. I could do it here, but this was done with intent and purpose to say let's meet and try to accommodate everyone. So yeah, this is what I like. This is why I love this so much, because I moved right from Copilot Studio into Azure Foundry or Microsoft Foundry. And then the benefits of this now are within Copilot Studio, and I'll remind myself later when we go through that demo, you have a choice of maybe 5 to 7 different models inside of Copilot Studio. Whereas here, you have that choice of 11,000 or more. So it's a little bit of a different game from that perspective. It might be something that's more finely tuned, it might be more fine grained, might be more, appropriate for what you're trying to do. Like maybe it's not a Q&A bot, it's maybe I'm taking pictures and I'm trying to figure out if it's, what kind of flower this might be or what kind of plant it might be. So there are different models that would work better for that than just GPT-4 or 5 or what have you. So
yeah,
but yeah,
the main thing there, I'm saying it's not as intimidating to go to this as from the Copilot Studio to here as I had envisioned.
Yeah. So isn't it? I mean, I love it. I love it. So that's why I love like kind of bridging this gap, and hopefully, like you've noticed, and hopefully you'll see those similarities through as I work through the rest of this too. So but yeah, so Sayed again built this in October. I could give it an agent description, some new bits and pieces here that I did not see before, but actions. So again, when I say action, think of those of you who are familiar with Power Platform. I could step out into another task or sequence or action. Could be a logic app. It could be Power Automate. It could be another um, potentially agent action that has been published out, but then it can also hand off to other agents. So inside of like Copilot Studio, we also have that idea of connected agents. We definitely have it here as well. Um, all your standard model settings, so temperature, top P, and then you can also voice enable your agent as well. So from there, we're pretending that we're deploying this new, it's been published, and then I want to give it a shot. So this try in Playground, it's also available over here in Playgrounds, but we're going to say try in Playground. And we have the chat in the middle. So what I'm going to do is just copy and paste, but I'm going to also call out one of the instructions here. So let me see if I can drag this out a little bit. I did give the system message or instructions some details. So it just said, job is to mimic Disney Park's Mouseketeer when responding to any of the questions in this Q&A approach. Rules are as follows. And I basically said, don't step out of character, use the reference files. When in doubt, don't try not to use the internet. I've also done other ways to make sure that that doesn't happen, or configured it in other ways so that it doesn't reach out specifically. But the key one was do not switch midstream to another character. Any of us that have been to Disney World, it's like that's a no-no. You cannot, impersonate somebody else. You can't switch to another character. So I want to make sure that I could emulate that same thing inside of my agent. And then the key one is make sure we're always fun, respectful, and even children can understand and laugh the responses. So make it fun and have some fun with it. All right. Let's see. So I'm going to do hello. Sorry about that. Switch back in 1 second. So what I said and what I gave it is I'm hungry and I'm at Hollywood Studios. I need a quick bite. Can you tell me where to go? And we got gosh, pal. So that sounds a little like Goofy, right? So as we can all read this, it calls out to, hey, you know, you might want to check out Woody's Lunchbox Storyland, Toy Story Land. You know, here's something sweet. And again, check the app. So there's a little bit of that reach out to the internet, but it's still looking at the documents that I gave it specifically to say, hey, I really wanted some food and I really wanted to focus on something sweet, like some desserts or what have you. I'm going to type this one out because I don't want to switch back to the other screen just yet. So I'm going to say, can you switch your responses to be in the character of Darth Vader? Hopefully we have some Darth Vader fans in here from here on out. I'm probably going to get sternly warned. Let's see if this happens. So there we go. I'm sorry, friend, but I can only stick to Mouseketeer roots for this magical conversation. After all, even every Disney day is brighter with a little Mouseketeer cheer. So
That's not very stern. That's very Disney stern.
So yeah, so thank you for calling that out. So right, I told it, I'm like Disney stern, right? So it's not breaking character. It's also staying stern based on the rules that we gave it. So, but yeah, so from that perspective, I found one other thing that I thought was really interesting, and I didn't even expect would happen. I did not really tell the model about any location awareness. So I'm like, I'm hungry for that turkey leg still. I'm at the Tower of Terror. So where's Oops, hello. So where is the nearest spot? This is also injecting or kicking in some location awareness and saying, hey, I realize that you're here and you're probably closest to Toluca Lakes Turkey Company, which is right on Sunset Boulevard. For anybody who's been there, you realize it's probably a 2-minute walk, right, from the Tower Terror. So kind of interesting, kind of you know, an extra skill that I didn't expect, but again, power of AI and the power of Microsoft Foundry. So I know it's brief, but hopefully again that's a light bulb moment for you all, just to see you know, where you could take some of this. All right, we're going to switch back to your slides. Copilot Studio. I know this is a very busy screen. I'll just make a few call outs. We talked about GPT-5 chat rolling out Copilot Studio. There was some improved knowledge retrieval for SharePoint grounded agents. Thank you goodness. That's been a long time coming. I want to call out this update Power Platform API calls to the new Copilot Studio namespace. So there will be at some point the old namespace would be deprecated. Ping me on the side if you need additional information about that. But again, one of the reminders is try to switch now. If you're just building things out, make sure that you're using that new Copilot Studio namespace because the other will be deprecated at some point. Copy agents from 365 Copilot to Microsoft Copilot Studio. It's been interesting to see how this is all transgressed, because when Azure AI Foundry first came out, now Microsoft Foundry, you were able to build exactly what we did and demoed just a few moments ago, and then export it or send it into Microsoft Copilot Studio to continue your work from there. So now we're getting the other side of taking it from Microsoft 365 Studio to bring it into Microsoft Copilot Studio, so we can use more advanced creation, editing skills, or potentially move that into Foundry. So now you're seeing that like sliding scale. If I could take something from the far left side in 365 Copilot and move it into Copilot Studio if I want to do low code, or if I really want to do pro code, move it all the way over into Microsoft Foundry. So pretty crazy. And then the one thing that I'm just an identity nerd and I'm excited about, and I hope you are too, but the second bullet under preview, automatically create agent identities for agents. That is pretty awesome because now you have that ability to utilize conditional access per agent. You have that richness inside of Entra ID to really protect the family jewels, protect your data, protect the users. If there's any kind of security risk whatsoever, that comes right up into that identity inside of Entra, and then you can utilize Defender and or Purview to kind of help address, monitor, and remediate. So pretty awesome from that perspective. All right, moving on. Just a brief walkthrough of some Copilot Studio pieces. So some of the stuff we talked about, I just want to hit on live. So again, if anybody notices that little branding, that branding's now persisted and throughout the entire environment for Copilot Studio as well. So purple, that little purple wrap for Foundry, and then this little almost like a folder set for Copilot Studio. I'm sure there's a better name for it. So if anybody from Microsoft is watching, don't accost me for that name. But I'm going to go into Copilot and Power Apps. And I just really want to talk about some of the settings. So again, we talked, from Foundry, we had a whole set. We saw maybe 150, but we have that whole set available of, over 11,000 agents to us. Here's our limit inside of Copilot Studio. So if I enabled inside of my environment, Claude Sonnet, Claude Opus, and I trusted the Anthropic models, great. And I can enable that for my users. They could build agents and go. Otherwise, what I get by default is 4.1, 5 chat, or 5 reasoning. And that reasoning is a preview model. So inside of settings, if you have not played with these or looked at any of the generative AI settings, you can turn this on or off. So yes, then you're going to have dynamic responses, available tools, and knowledge. Deep reasoning is now in preview. That's a slider that you can adjust. That gives you that ability to really think about, well, not you, but the agent, to think a little bit deeper and do a little bit more research. So if you've been using any other AI tools and you turn that slider on, you say, here, I really want you to think about, I don't know, I want to build this new business and I want to create a mission, vision, value. Go deep reason and think about this. Here's my rules of engagement. Go do the thing. It might take 30 seconds, might take a minute to come back. That's the deep reasoning part. Connected agents. Again, that's as you're building these, if you want it to be connected to something else or you want to connect to something else, I would recommend that you have this on. I don't know of good reasons that you would want this off unless it's something that maybe is a sensitive type of setup. So just that nod. We got moderation and other bits and pieces, but I really want to go down to this setting. So if you're, again, in the era of a RAG approach or RAG-minded approach in grounding, if you're turning on this setting at the top for generative AI orchestration, and then Lawrence, to your point, if I wanted to go into knowledge and then upload files, you're going to want to make sure that this general knowledge is turned off. If you don't do that, it will skip past your knowledge and you will spend quite some time figuring out, like, why is this happening? I uploaded information, it's not using it. But again, it will say right here, to ground your agent only with your specific knowledge searches, turn this off. So that will turn off the web capabilities, just to call that out. Yeah, and from that perspective, again, just super brief, but I just wanted to at least call a couple of these things out. If you're really diving into Copilot Studio a lot more, my humble reminder to you would be either to get I believe there's a way to set up your tenant or set up a part of one of your environments to be in a preview. Do that because these have been changing almost weekly. So there will be new settings that'll come out. If you have a preview environment, you'll see those quickly and you can kind of address them quicker in your environment. and in your organizations. Otherwise, you'll get a surprise because Microsoft will just publish the documentation that might not match. So, all right.
Hey, Chris, you got a question in the comments from Dylan. It's a good one.
Oh,
Do you want me to read it? Can you see it?
yeah, I can see it. Thank you. Processed it. Yeah. So timing wise, Dylan, which agent? You said the process
The
to deploy the
Disney
agent for others.
agent.
Yeah.
I'm just curious. This is I at the beginning you said that there's some options, I believe, for serverless or all the way up to spinning up a Kubernetes
Yes.
server. Is that where this gets complicated?
Yes.
Or is there a
Yes.
simple publish button? Okay.
Yeah. So from the perspective from the perspective of just publishing out of Foundry, it's like, yes, there's a simple, like, if I want to use this, you can go and basically say, here, I want to export. I believe it's an export, and then you have a panel that comes up. And that panel will have a bunch of different options. One is SIM 365, you got Copilot Studio, and then you have other apps. Where it gets complicated is if we're suggesting like like a web app or something like that, that resource needs to be created in Azure first. So it needs to already be created and built out to some extent. There might be, wink wink, some changes coming with some of that, but from an AKS perspective, that's you need container registry, you need your networking and other bits and
Sure.
pieces set up. So way more complicated on the AKS side, not as complicated on a web app side. So,
Okay. I appreciate
great
it.
question.
So it's very solution dependent.
Yes, yes.
Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, I should have been paying attention to the chat. I love the chat. Thank you all. Okay. And I think we're just a hair over time, Heidi, but keep me honest. So I'm gonna try and go through the
It's
rest of
okay.
this.
We
But
started 4 minutes late, so I'm sure
Okay.
everyone will stay an additional 4 minutes to see
I
Lenore's full
think
session.
I think I could probably get through it in that 4 minutes. So because there's not much left, but it's the huge light bulb moment that I've been working up to. So cool, thank you. So again, from this perspective, what's new in Power Platform? Like, how does this all relate? Chris, this is all great. You're showing us all kind of stuff that's maybe outside of Power Platform. A lot of Foundry, Foundry Agent Service. So yes, Microsoft still has this called Azure AI Foundry Agent Service. It should change at some point, but this gives you, again, this is a connector. So that connector allows you to integrate your Foundry Agent Service capabilities directly in your workflows. Again, I can share these slides afterwards. Happy to do that. If you want to take a screen grab of this too, that's fine. Highly recommend taking a look at both of these links. The one at the bottom, the Foundry, Microsoft Foundry Inference connector has been upgraded, has been redone. That is a first-party connector for, second typo, Microsoft Foundry, not Azure AI Foundry models, but it's specifically designed for chat completion tasks. So that's where I'm kind of heading, is this Foundry Inference connector. So last quick demo. Hopefully the demo gods and goddesses are still with us and happy. This one's already pre-built, but I'm just going to throw us into Power Automate. Hopefully you've at least had some experience with Power Automate, but all I did was create a basic flow. So manual trigger flow, compose message, but where we're really going, Microsoft has yet to update this branding, but this chat completion piece is just that. It will, so we can go and choose the Foundry inference piece. And as we saw, similar configurations inside of Microsoft Foundry, we have those same configurations here. So under this inference connector, we have what's the API version of your endpoint? And that's here. Let me go back and do a connection example. We'll just skip back one page under connectors because I really want to hit this home. So setting up that new connector, I'm basically giving it that endpoint. If I can edit this. Looks familiar, right? Target URI, that was one of the first things I had demoed. That's our endpoint. The API key, I had to copy that out. This is where we paste that in. We give the model deployment name and then the base model name and click update. That's how that connects off to what we built inside of Microsoft Foundry. And then that's how we, again, light bulb moment, can bring this type of Foundry richness back into your Power Platform application, whether it's Power App, Power Automate, Power BI, you name it. So again, we'll skip back to where we first started. Here, I'm basically just passing through body and messages of an output for role content, and then this would trigger as that same Q&A bot. So instead of doing the playground like we had done in Foundry, we can do that here inside of Power Automate. So quick and dirty, but that's all there is to that piece. All right, key takeaways. I always say state of the art. These are pretty crazy tools that are just building and getting rebuilt and updated over and over again. But hopefully you all have a deeper understanding of what Foundry brings and how that can be combined with Microsoft Copilot Studio, even more so combined into business applications table. So again, Power Platform. We've gone through that journey of some of the visionary concepts, some actionable strategies, some insights into practical examples, proven best practices for things. And then I've also tried to walk you all through some of the new releases, new ideas and things that are coming, so that you can kind of plan ahead for your future and current releases. Check out the release cycle environment again, and then hopefully you all had a just memorable light bulb moments throughout this, and as fun of a time as I had giving this session to you all. I always do this, but wait, there's more. I do have suggested resources for you all. So, as always, governance white paper, please, please, please check that out. Microsoft has done a fantastic job. They worked with some customers, worked with a bunch of MVPs to build that out. Agent cost management book, Lawrence, that's right up your alley. I need to go back and do some more homework on that one too, because those are always changing rules. Copilot Studio Estimator, that is not just a usage, but a cost estimator as well. And then the Microsoft Learn article, I'm not going to surprise or ruin a surprise for y'all, but if you go take a look at that link, check it out. Very, very worthwhile resource. I'll give a 3-second pause, make sure anybody, if they want to take a screen grab of that, has it. And I just want to thank you all for attending and showing up today and asking wonderful, awesome questions. So hopefully you all learned, and thank you very much.
Chris, this was awesome. Thank you so much. Is there any way we could get a copy of those slides and I could throw them up on our user group page? You rock.
Absolutely.
Everyone will be thrilled with that. This was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And now Lenore Flower is here to talk about paginated reports in Power BI.
I feel like I need one of those transition things that they used to have in Monty Python, and now time for something entirely different.
Oh, I'll do that next time. Sorry. We even have a timer. Look at your countdown.
Yeah,
I'm
look
so
at you.
excited.
I'm
Lenore.
all in, you guys. Okay, so I'm going to set this timer. This is my first time I'm doing this with live demos and a timer, so I might be setting myself up for absolute chaos, but
This is awesome.
at least you'll have a video and we can laugh about it later. So this session is called Race Against the Clock, Power BI to Print Ready in 45 minutes. First, I guess I should introduce myself. So here's me. That's my face. I run a company called Data Plumber LLC. I also organize the Power BI DC meetup. We had Data Nerd Festivus last night, which was a lot of fun. So if you ever want to join us at one of our online events or in person, everyone is welcome. I also launched a podcast recently. Still figuring out how to edit things, so my return on audios is slow. But the first 2 episodes are available on a podcatcher near you. And I have a marketing team making me an even snazzier logo, so keep an eye out for that. And I am a avid part of the Tech Fluent volunteer team. So I do classes for them and I mentor, and I'm very excited about them. When I'm not on a timer, I would talk your ear off about Tech Fluent anytime you'd like. When I'm not doing all that, I'm a hobby maximalist. That's me blacksmithing to varying levels of success. That's the first tomato I ever grew. And that's some yarn that I spun by hand. It's a very interesting adventure. But we're here to talk about paginated reports. So we're going to start with my printable report horror story. And then we're going to go through basic printing options that you have as of 2025. And we're going to learn Power BI Report Builder and how you can get something pretty quick from what you've already done in Power BI Desktop, including getting your data, understanding the parameter relay race, things that we can know about titles and formatting, and then getting the darn thing to print, which I have discovered is often the hardest part for some folks. So part one, why should we bother learning about paginated reports? The answer is pretty simple. Sometimes you need things to print or PDF, and Power BI Desktop isn't very good at it. And to demonstrate this, I would like to just briefly share with you the horror story I have from about 2018, where I had put together a report pretty similar to this one for a company that I was working for. I wasn't even on the business intelligence side. I was working in finance, and they had told me they would never need it to be printed off. So I'd been very happily putting it together. I was very proud of this report. And then the day before a board meeting, they needed a copy of each of these for every single department, which was a problem. It was a problem for several reasons. One of them was that paginated reports didn't exist in the Power BI service yet, and neither did some of the alternatives that I'm going to show you in a second. So if you've ever tried to print off a Power BI report, you may already be aware that, that the elements that will come out are just going to be basically a JPEG image of the report itself. So you'll end up with the name of the different slicers showing up. And if you have a, sorry, I had another slide I must have hidden it. If you have scroll bars, which this did in this case, it will show the scroll bars instead of multiple pages of your information. So what I had to do is go through manually and screenshot for 20 different departments overnight all the relevant information. And the screenshots were blurry, so the executives were not happy. Nobody had a good time. So why is this the case? Why can't we just use Power BI Desktop? The short answer is that Power BI Desktop, if you think of it as a tool that was designed with key requirements, right? The things that Power BI Desktop is designed to do is to be able to expand and contract on screens of varying sizes. So you'll see it on giant conference room screens, and you'll see it on people's tablets, and sometimes you'll see it on their phones. It's designed to be really interactive. It's designed to have a lot of exploration capacity, slicers, drill downs, what if analysis. And those are features that come at a cost, right? If you're going to have something that expands and contracts, tracks, and has a lot of variability in how it can look based on how people are interacting with it, it's going to be a really tall order to get it to print too. So Power BI Desktop specializes in a fundamentally different purpose than what we need when we want to get something to print it off. That's why whenever I'm working with clients or I'm teaching a class, I emphasize that Power BI Desktop is never for printing. In some situations, if you don't have a scroll bar and you're really, really careful with how you set up the report, you can make it so you can generate a JPEG. But in most cases, that's not going to work for you. And just to reiterate the point, here's what would print off when we have this report. And this is the JPEG image with the scroll bars and not the repeating, and not the multiple pages of information supported in the scroll bars. You also, of course, have these two slicers up here, which is not what the executives want to see in a report. So what are our options? One, you can manually print your Power BI Desktop in JPEGs and go page break to page break. This sucks. I don't recommend it. Don't do it. You can create a paginated report in the Power BI service. There's a preview option. So if you have a very simple report, you can build off of a semantic model that you've already built a report like the one we were just looking at. That has serious limitations, but sometimes that can save your bacon, and we'll take a quick look at that. You can jerry rig something in Excel. that is a real option. It is going to create some new problems for you to solve, but we'll take a quick look at that and then use Power BI Report Builder, the tool that is actually designed to solve this problem. How is all of this possible, and how am I reasonably confident that sticking this timer up here is not going to bite me in the butt? And the core answer there is that the semantic model is the key thing that's going to make that possible. So if you've already gone through the effort to generate a report in Power BI, you already have a semantic model. And if you've built out that semantic model using best practices, that data will carry into Excel using Get Data, into the Power BI Report Builder using the semantic model. And of course, you can recycle everything that you did in that semantic model in Power BI. It's not always the best option to have a golden semantic model that's sort of one semantic model to rule them all, but there are often times where that makes a lot of sense for individual departments or for smaller organizations. And I'm a really big fan of that strategy for this reason, because you can recycle things, have it in one place and repeat it. So in the service, using created paginated report view, if you just need a simple table, no parameters are required. In other words, those two slicers mean that it's not our option in this case, and no graphs are required, and you don't care so much about the formatting, you can make a paginated report in the Power BI service. I actually really love this option when you have individual business users who are saying, hey, this report is great. Can I export it to Excel? Can I get this version of a table? Instead of repeatedly creating new variations of the report for them, you can get them comfortable using the paginated report preview, which will allow them on an ad hoc basis to create their own versions of the reports. I'm going to show you briefly how one does that. So here we are in my demo workspace environment. Here's the semantic model that we're playing with today. And you've got Create Paginated Report Preview. Once you get into Paginated Report Preview, you have the ability to build off of the semantic model that we have here. And it looks like, sorry, just 1 second. The demo gods are not being as nice to me. Let me refresh the one I'd already opened up. That's what it should look like. So going from the preview, you get a very simple report pane, and you have the ability to grab individual values from that same semantic model we were looking at before. So I'm going to grab region and, oops, yep, there we go. Division, region, and let's grab a couple of values like total quantity and total sales. If all I need is a table that includes a few of those values, it will put together a simple report like this, which I will zoom in on. I can remember how Zoom it works properly. Oh, bother. Uno momento, por favor. There we go. Nope, all of my tricks are not working. This is so great. Escape is not working. This is so good. Okay. There we are. So here we are in our, you can see the preview right here. And if we hit print, we can get a very basic report that looks like this. Not a lot of formatting going on here. There's not a lot of options beyond creating a basic table. If we go to the insert section, you can add an image. So you could add a logo in here, a header, a footer, and a text box, but that's about all you have to work with. So sometimes this will work. And as you can see, yeah, it's a pretty boring report, but we did that in about 2 seconds. So that is an option. Door number 2 is to say, hey, I'm pretty good at Excel. Maybe I can do something in Excel to solve the problem. So I'm opening up and analyze in Excel, and I'm not going to go too deep on this, but just to show you, analyze in Excel, which you can also get to usually from get data, depending on the configuration of your version. Here's that same model, and we can go through and add in additional fields once you enable content, otherwise it won't populate through. And we can do roughly the same thing. What did I choose before? Region, vision, and total sales and total quantity. Now, in theory, you could use this to print out too, but once you start building out the overall structure the same way that we're looking at in that initial report where you have the quarter information in place, and let's say we wanted to also have additional values in here around including the year, this starts to get really wide really fast. And then suddenly you have the same problem we were talking about in the first place, which is, gosh, this is kind of icky to print. It's not really coming together the way we want it to. This isn't working great either. And if you don't like this formatting, you can do some work with the formatting to clean it up in Excel. But you're going to have to do a lot of fancy footwork to make that happen, right? You could even, if you're really fancy, explore creating a dynamic report in here and have it printed from Excel. I've done that before, but then you kind of have to learn MDX, multi-dimensional expressions, to be able to use the raw data that's coming in from here using cube value. The way I got to this was simply by taking the pivot table we have already from the Power BI service and then switching this to OLAP tools, convert to formulas. Now you've got a whole new can of worms. You got to learn how to incorporate MDX, and you need to make sure that nobody screws up the file that is pulling data dynamically from the Power BI API. So this is an option, but it's not necessarily going to be any faster, which is how we're going to end up heading over to the actual tool that is designed to solve this problem. And that is Power BI Report Builder. This is what Power BI Report Builder looks like. It's pretty boring. I'm going to show you a few more slides before we go in here and build things out. But if you're someone that has a background in SQL Server reporting services, this is going to look mighty familiar, and that is for good reason.
Okay,
so let's see.
First, yeah, good point there. For us that are familiar with the SSRS,
yeah,
why bother with this? Because it already prints in SSRS.
If you, I've paused. I'm stating for the record that I've paused the timer because I'm keeping my time. But
Okay,
Lawrence, no, you're good. If you are already using SQL Server reporting services and you have everything queued up on a report for SSRS, keep using that report. I do believe that I'm trying to remember the specific information, but there's something about SSRS no longer being supported. That's a ways down the road. So you don't need to make any quick moves, but this is sort of next generation SSRS. And the reason that you would want to use this instead of SSRS is in circumstances where the data that you need is coming from a Power BI semantic model, or you're otherwise building out a new report rather than maintaining an existing one. I'm a big fan of don't fix what's not broken, right? So if you've got a report that's doing you just fine, keep using it. But there are some reasons that I'll touch on at least briefly in the presentation that will help to make the why of how that can be valuable more concrete.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, timer is back on. So Power BI Report Builder. You've got Power BI Desktop. You've probably played with this at least once, even if Power BI isn't your tool of choice. But this creates what's called a PBIX file. And then you have Power BI Report Builder, which creates what's called an RDL file, Report Definition Language. And for ringers like Lawrence, who know SSRS, that will look familiar because that is the same file term at the end of, that's the same file name that is going to be used for SSRS as well. Suffix, that's the word. So from my horror story, you probably know that I really appreciated when Power BI Report Builder came out. But as people are continuing to become familiar with Power BI Report Builder, I keep coming across a lot of griping. And I think that's fair. I have some theories on why this is, but I cackled when I saw this on Reddit a couple of years ago, where it says, if you could change anything about Power BI, what would it be and why would it be Power BI Report Builder? I dread every second of using it. One reason I think is that standard Power BI reports, that Power BI desktop, has spent the last 10 years charming us and being extremely friendly and constantly looking to meet our needs, right? Every month, the Power BI service gets new features. It is very responsive to requests from the overall community. Paginated Power BI reports haven't gotten that same treatment so much. And the way I like to describe this when I'm doing my training is to reference the Good Place. You can think of standard Power BI reports as good Janet from The Good Place, who says, "Hi there, how can I help?" And she's very friendly and very supportive and generally just bubbly and fun. Power BI is very much designed in good Janet's mode. Paginated Power BI reports are more to serve a purpose. They do exactly what they're asked and nothing else. That doesn't mean they're not incredibly useful. It just means that they have a fundamentally different way that they're presented. So have a little bit of sympathy for neutral Janet in paginated Power BI reports. The other thing that I like to call out is that with the paginated / Power BI report builder, it really is a hybrid of SSRS and Power BI desktop mushed together. Those are two tools that have different origin stories, right? So paginated report builder, Power BI report builder, you'll see them name different things, but they're the same thing. They are coming from the SQL side of things, whereas Power BI desktop is coming from the business side and Power Pivot and Excel. Their native habitats are different. The query logic that they originally used was different. And that means that they're a little bit funky. And the thing that I find really fun when I'm doing trainings on this is whether you come from a SQL background or an Excel / Power BI background, this tool baffles you because of that hybrid capacity, that hybrid element. It's pulling a little bit from both. There's a bit of shoehorning going in there, and that means that it feels a little bit foreign to everybody. That's okay though, we can work with that. The main thing to remember here is that if you're going to work through building a paginated report the same way you expect that Power BI desktop will work, you're not going to have a good time. And that, I think, is the crux of why people get so frustrated with the tool. So we're going to build in Power BI Report Builder when we need that pixel perfect report. It's the opposite of the flexibility that we have in Power BI desktop. It's intended to be restrictive so that it works exactly the way that we want. And in that sense, it really is going to be more boring on purpose. There are times where you need a report that, in addition to being printed, or it doesn't matter if it's being printed, you just need an operational report. Think back to the preview that we just saw in the Power BI service of just creating a basic report where we just pulled out the data. Power BI Report Builder is great for that, whether you do it on the Power BI service or in Report Builder. And it can also be a really helpful alternative to having something online when the Wi-Fi is iffy. So sometimes you need things to be printed out for a meeting. Sometimes you need them to be emailed out to hundreds of customers. And sometimes you need to go into a nuclear plant where you're not allowed to have the Wi-Fi working. All these are valid reasons to create a Power BI Report Builder report. All right, let's dig in and get started. Here on our standard Power BI report, we have our starting point. This is what we want to land on in about 26 minutes. We have a matrix, 2 slicers, a header, and a subheader. To get us started here, we know that this paginated s'mores reporting demo semantic model is already up on the Power BI service, which is exactly what we're going to need. Because once we have that connected and I have the right tenant connected here, I can use that exact same semantic model connection to be the source for my report. And that saves me a ton of time. So here's my data set that I'm going to connect to. That is what the Power BI report builder calls our semantic model. This is the data source. We build a data set on top of it. I'm going to give it an arbitrary name. If we just had a table that we were trying to pull in, we could copy paste the underlying query from a table visual in Power BI Desktop here. But instead, we're going to use the query designer. And we're going to create the base of our report. So here we are. I'm going to pull in the information that I need, starting with the customer information. I'm going to cheat a little bit and remind myself what we're using here. Just trying to click on the visuals. So yeah, state, customer name, quarter name, total quantity, average price per unit, and sales is what we're going for. I'm just going to drag state, customer name, order name, and then in the measures, which always pops all the way up here just to confuse things, average price per unit, total quantity, and total sales. Did I get them all? Yes. Okay. Just to refresh, this will create a subset of information for us, which is what we're going to need for our report. And that is generating a query that is using DAX logic. Evaluate, summarize columns will probably look familiar to many of you who work with DAX. Once I hit OK, I have the underlying data available, and I need to create a matrix the same general way that we would in Power BI Desktop. It's going to look a little bit different. We have fewer options available here than what you're used to in Power BI Desktop, but we have everything we need. Here's the matrix. I'm going to choose Insert, and I'm just going to go ahead and get started. There's our state. There's our customer name. So we'll have state with customer name nested within. Although I believe that went into the title instead of the column. There we go. There's our state. There's our customer name. I can hit run up here so I can briefly show you what's populating. So each state is coming through with the information within it. And then I can add quarter name on top. There's that column section. And then the data is going to go right here. I'm going to delete that column. Well, let's hold off on that for a second. Average price per unit. And I can drag, and you'll see this little I symbol to say, hey, you can add it to the section. Note that the quarter name is expanding here. And then total sales. Now I have everything for my 3 summable values grouped beneath here with the quarter name on top. Center the quarter name here. I'll go ahead and delete this column. And I don't know if you noticed, but down here in the row groups and the column groups, as I'm building this up, it is already building out the structure of how the data is being grouped. When you build up a report, it's going to show up as something very basic, showing you just the information about the fields, which is why you'll often toggle over and over again between the run and design views. So now we have the basic, if ugly, structure of our report. And if we compare that to what we were seeing before, yeah, it's looking pretty similar. We need to do a little bit of work, but we're starting to see the overall way that the report comes together. Not sure why it is showing up in that particular view. Oh, that's so good. There we go. Maximize that out. All right. Back to our slides for a hot minute because I live dangerously. To recap briefly, what we're doing here is setting up a semantic model in the Power BI service and repurposing it. The semantic model contains multitudes. The Power BI builder's data source acts as a bridge, and then we generate a data set in the Power BI report builder. To kind of expand that out to show you what we just did, here is the semantic model that we're pulling from. Here is what we pulled from the Power BI service to get our semantic model information. And then here's the query designer with the same information. A couple things that we want to call out here are that when we are adding a data set, you right click to make that available. When you go into add properties, you will have the ability to open it after you add the data set, and you're able to click. Sorry, let me see if I can minimize that. Click to build the query, although you could also write out a DAX measure if you so chose. One other thing we want to point out here is that it is very confusing for people that are just starting to use Power BI Paginated Report that we have values that we could use that are fields, like a quantity value, but aren't explicitly measures. That's something that's really easy to do in the Power BI service, sorry, Power BI desktop, because it creates an implicit measure on the back end. So anytime that you're pulling in a field, say here in our report, we have the ability to use a field like quantity, and it will generate exactly the same output as total quantity. But that's because on the back end, there is implicit calculations that are being applied. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to go into that, although I really want to. But you can tell that because it's applying this sum, right? The reason that it needs you to tell it which of these versions you might want to have is that it is applying an aggregation in the visual itself. And that means that you have a really user-friendly interface, but those implicit measures that are happening on the back end of a visual, they don't travel outside of a visual. They stay right there, which means when you want to use it in a context like a Power BI paginated report, it just doesn't work. Same thing for Microsoft Excel. So anytime that we're working with this, we want any of the values that need to be calculable from the service, from the Power BI report semantic model in the Power BI service to already have the measures in place. And we never want to be pulling individual fields from the tables. These will work well in a paginated report. The individual fields will create a bit of chaos. Okay. So to recap, use measures, save sanity. Things get really messy if you try to use individual fields. Minimize the number of columns because the volume of data increases for each one. Include a sort field if you need one. We're going to deliberately leave one off and come back to it. And then we're going to get into the parameter section above here. So we have our basic data. We have these two slicers that we need to replace. And the way that we're going to handle that is by creating what I like to call the parameter relay race. So key source of confusion that often comes up when you're building a paginated report is that there's query filters and there are query parameters. And in the query design editor, they're assigned in the same spot. It's very subtle how we distinguish between the two. But it's important to know the difference both in terms of what you're trying to accomplish and how you communicate that to the paginated report tool. So a filter is something that you're going to define at the report level within that query. It's not going to change based on what people select on the front end. Parameters have much more complex interactions happening within the report because they need to facilitate those selections being chosen by the report user at report runtime. So very briefly, here's our query filter. This says values, date, year, where the value is 2023. That's a hard-coded value. It's not dynamically changing. And that, when the report is run in, from the Power BI report builder, is going to go to the year in the Power BI data set / semantic model, filter the relevant values in the fact table. And it's almost as if when you're in Power BI desktop, you took this date value for your fact table and you filtered it directly right here. That's all going to be passed back using that filter context. When we go in and we look at the query designer, you'll see a table name called a dimension, a field name called a hierarchy, and a filter type called an operator. This will be equal, greater than, less than, a filter expression, which is usually going to be some sort of value, and this thing that says parameters, which is very confusing. Unchecked equals filter, checked equals parameter. 2 checks means we're going to be filtering, parameterizing based on start and end date. So you're going to be choosing a range. Heading back to our semantic model, we have our base parameter, we have our base table. We go back into the query designer. We're going to go up into this section at the top, and we're going to get the same values for slicer and region, which are for quarter name and region. So we need both of these slicers to become parameters. Here's quarter name. And I'm going to click this box to make it a parameter. And then I'm going to grab a region. And I'm going to click on that to become a parameter as well. If I want to set a default value to come through in the parameter, then I can define that here. If I did not check that checkbox, it would not show up. It would not show up as a parameter. It would instead filter the values in the overall query, which will return that subset for the report. So now it is doing a lot of things on the back end that you don't even know. I don't know if you caught that, but it just added this RX custom DAX filter, which is a custom DAX function designed to carry values back to the semantic model from Power BI paginated reports specifically. When we hit OK, a bunch of things happen that you won't even notice if you don't know to look for them. And this is where we get into that paginated relay race. So I just expanded out parameters and I unhid data sets. We have the data quarter name and the customer region. All of these are creating the underlying infrastructure to make it possible for data to come and go. So this was automatically generated when I defined a parameter. And this is going to become the information that shows up in that drop-down list in the parameters on the report itself. There's a lot we can do to make this better. We don't necessarily need to use the hidden data sets as is, but in the interest of time, since we have 12 minutes and 30 seconds and change, we're going to sally forth. We can also add parameters to be able to see in our basic report building area that 2 have been placed automatically in the upper left of our report. If we go back to our report, we can see now that that default of Q1 and that region default of South that I just arbitrarily chose, they're both here, but I have the ability to select all, I have the ability to select more, or remove the selection I made. And then up here, I'm going to view the report. And now I have just the selections. So we're starting to get that functionality that we need, which is really good. Parameters are really hard for people to get their heads around for a couple of reasons. The biggest one is that all of this stuff, if I hadn't gone to show hidden data sets, you wouldn't even know it's here. And when people go through and they're making adjustments to their reports, such as deleting parameter values, it is really easy for these to have related filtering contexts that impact each other in the data sets, which means all of a sudden you start to get errors for queries that you're not even using. And that makes things really confusing unless you know what's going on. So let me walk you through this quickly. In the parameter relay race, when we check that box, as we just saw, it's going to do some extra work for us. We saw the RS custom DAX filter get built out. That's going to feed back into the Power BI semantic model. Then when we go back into the dataset properties, we'll see that there are query parameters that were written for us, named for us as well, with that @ symbol defining the parameter value. And we have those hidden data sets that showed up that you would never know about unless you click this box that says show hidden data sets. Then you have these report parameters, which have their own properties. On top of everything else, the data type has been auto-defined for you. And then, of course, you have these additional portions at the top of the parameters that demonstrate where the report parameters are going to show up. When a user selects these, that underlying hidden data set is making it possible to have this drop-down list. Otherwise, you'd have to manually type something in, right? Which would be very inefficient. The report user selects it, and then the parameter region value becomes something like equals south. That equals south value gets the flavor of the data type from the report parameter properties, and that also gets passed back. This parameter value at region has two key things that are coming back with it into the Power BI semantic model: the specific value or values that are being carried back from the report selection, and that data type text. This is important to keep in mind if you're doing something like a date picker, where when you select it, you can either have a data type date time that is working the way that the query expects, or you can have the date picker view, but not both unless you do some additional adjustments to the report structure. And all of that ultimately gets passed back to the Power BI semantic model with the values being presented like so. So that is equivalent in each of these. And that is what goes back into the semantic model so that the data can be returned. So that's the parameter relay race in very short order. Now we're going to get into formatting. We're going to keep this simple, but basically there's going to be a mix of built-in fields that you can use, and you can add those to a title. You can put that in a header or a footer. To get to where we want to go with our report, we know that we want to have a title, but maybe we want that to show up on every single page rather than just on the first page. If that's the case, we'll need to add a header. I'm going to do that now. I'm going to use this default title box, although if you deleted that, you can always just create your own title box. And we're going to pull in quarterly sales report. Because I'm going to be quick, I'm going to just call this chosen regions. I'm going to make it smaller so it fits. When you put a value in the header, it will repeatedly print on every single page. If you leave a title in the body of your report, it will not repeat, it will only show up once. So here we are back in our report. We will leave the default values as is. If we choose the print layout, which right now will look hideous, ignore the printer connections, we'll be able to see that each page, even if they're blank, will show up with those same value, that same title value. Sometimes you want that, sometimes you don't. But anything that you need to have repeat on each page, you want to put in the header. Similarly, and execution time is the time that the report was printed out. That will show up by default every single time that you open a basic report, and that's in the footer. But if we go to built-in fields, we know that we want a page number. We can drag that into the footer, and that will give us the page number as well. And when we go to run it, here's a report in its misformatted glory. You can see that we have the time that it was done and the page number showing up on each page, as well as the report header. Let's do a little bit of cleanup. So we've only got 6 minutes left before our hypothetical executive team demands this report. We have a basic table structure here with a state, customer, and quarter name. I'm going to go ahead and make this bold same way that you would in any other scenario. And I can do some basic formatting very similar to what you would do in an Excel file, or you can choose to have grid lines or no. I think I'm going to do, for just this section, I'm going to get grids all around. And I'm not sure if I love it being black though, so I might make that light gray in a real scenario. Then we have to take a look at the overall spacing that we have here. This default setup is pretty much for the birds. We do not care about the height, except that if we give it more space at the bottom, it's going to continually give that blank space every single time. So we actually want to take the vertical space and put it as close to the information that we have on our basic report section as possible. That'll help us avoid the repeating blank pages. And then on the width, what we want to do is make sure that this aligns with the desired width that we'll have for this report. I'm going to go ahead and arbitrarily say that we're going to want this to be an 8.5 by 11 standard letter size. And the way that we're going to fix this so that it aligns with that is by going into the body, and we're going to adjust the size so that the width will be exactly what we want. It's 8.5 by 11 for letter, right? So if we want that to be a 1/2 inch on each side, here are margins. Let's say 0.5 inches for the left and right to give us a little bit more room. And then in the body, we know that we had 8.5, now we have 7.5 to work with. We want this to be exact because if the body and the report expectation of the size don't match up, we're going to get some really interesting issues with the print. So 2 1/2 inch margins from 8.5 gets us 7.5 inches. That's the total space that we have for the report. And that will give us some room so that when the corner name is repeating more, it'll be able to fit. So now we have our basic report structure. We can move our executed time. There's one more thing that we might want to do here, which is way back when we were starting with this, we noted that we need to be able to organize our data by group. We need to be able to sort our data, which requires us to have things like a quarter sort value. You'll see this a lot with months as well, where you just want your information to show up in the right order. To do that, the sort logic that you put into a Power BI semantic model isn't going to carry over. So I'm just grabbing the same quarter sort that I used in my Power BI report. I'm hitting OK. And now that I have that, I can go into the quarter name properties and I can choose sorting and update that to quarter sort, which will keep the quarter name order going correctly based on what I need. Heading back to home, we hit run. We have a report that's a little ugly, but it's doing its job. Oh no, do you see that? We also are missing the repeating headers on the top. That won't do it all. So now what we need to do is to make sure that our tablets properties are also repeating the headers and rows on each page. And we'll also choose keep header visible while scrolling, which will be easier to work with when we are dealing with the online version of the report. Now we have a report that is showing up with our headers. We want to do a little bit of cleanup. We've got dates coming in. And while we're probably going to want to do a little bit of extra cleanup here, for example, making sure that all of our values for things like quantities are showing up as a whole number, and our total sales and our average price are both showing up as currency. And while we want to do a little bit of extra tidying to make this ready. It does give us the output that we need. And that, with 45-ish seconds to spare, is how you can very quickly go from an existing Power BI desktop report to a Power BI paginated report that prints.
I'm
Questions?
impressed. Nice job.
Thanks. I'm exhausted. So yeah, this is a new version of this session, so feedback is very welcome. But hopefully that gives you a sense for how you can leverage the Power BI paginated report option when you need to get things to print. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Does anyone have questions for Lenore? Also,